because this breakout session is designed that for the next period of time we can talk about various different parts of testing or services that we provide. I have specific dedicated questions. We have some people from our team here, be more than delighted to answer and to talk about some of the more challenging projects that we get involved in and how that works. Iosif, while we're talking, why don't I ask you about some of these projects that have come up on the screen? So if you wanted to start talking about a number of them, give us an example. So chatbots is an interesting subject where we've started as an organization to do some more work. Why don't you just give us, from your perspective, what you think the difference that we add to the testing of chatbots is and what we're looking to do in that specific area?
In this area, most chatbots are currently tested internally by development team, and they use their own model for testing. They use their own tools for testing. What we can bring to the table is the possibility to have independent look at the chatbots, and I can see that currently people are not really ready to thoroughly test their chatbots. So most of the time people accept that if you are not able to understand the conversation flow, you just switch to some pre-canned answer, or you just switch topic. In the recent videos that we've published on A4Q AI and software testing, there's example of our conversations with chatbot Mitsuki. So once used, it is very good at simulating intelligence, but it is very, very easy to, say, get a failed test case within several seconds. And the more we talk to various banks and vendors about testing chatbots, I think people are aware that their current virtual assistant is not really ready to be tested. So it is more put out as a toy rather than something that can be used, say, to do something.
Okay. So welcome to some of the guests to the breakout session that we've got here. What we have here is the CEO of Exactpro, and we're able to have a number of discussions around a number of different topics. And we could actually be guided by yourself if that's better. All I'll ask is, if you're not speaking, can you just put yourself on mute, because there's quite a bit of feedback. Okay, thanks very much. So Iosif, we were just talking about an example of a small project that's come up where we're getting more involved in asking about things like chatbots and the testing of them and how that works. We have other, what you're viewing on the screen is part of our website. And here we've just put a number of things to trigger a conversation, but we could be directed by where you'd like to go, if that's fair to you today. We could talk about various of these solutions where we've tested different complex software at different locations, or we could talk about tools, or we could talk about approaches. So Iosif, then I'm going to pick on a very different subject, okay, if possible. We hear a lot, and I heard some more about it today, about BDD and Cucumber. What are your thoughts on using BDD as an approach to defining testing and as a solution for solving complex software? Is that what you recommend for someone looking at a large program of work, or what do you see as the observations that you're thinking about in that?
PDD is not a software testing method. It is more software development approach and also a way to define specifications. We've observed how BDD implementations look in large-scale projects, and most of the time there appear to be quite a lot of things identified after the software is released for testing. So BDD is the very reflection of confirmation bias. So we expect to see something, we code what we expect to see something, and then we actually observe it during test. So without testing that is based on something else, BDD by itself is not capable of delivering complex projects. There are also many limitations involved in using BDD for trading or clearing platforms when there are, first of all, such systems, they have quite a lot of configuration. And frequently, BDD scenarios written in Cucumber, they are focused on several actions and simple user stories. But in reality, you need to reflect the full complexity of configurations. Very frequently, I saw Gherkin scenarios that are several lines long, but all complexity should go into given section. So if we will really consider what is given for that scenario, it will be thousands of, not thousands, but at least hundreds of hundreds of configuration parameters. Also, in complex distributed systems, we frequently observed that their behavior might be non-deterministic. So, and in these areas, we frequently observe various interesting defects. Overall, we use a slightly advanced version of BDD. We think that it is not possible to describe trading or clearing platform using Gherkin scenarios, but the idea itself that you can specify the behavior of the system before you start testing it is good. So we do quite a lot of model-based testing. Model-based testing in the sense that we take a model of particular activity, for example, of a settlement process or margin risk calculation process or trading auction, exchange opening auction. We implement this model and then we use it to produce scenarios. In this sense, it is still possible to use this model as a description of behavior and try to use it to test the systems. But overall, at least I observed quite a lot of projects where BDD scenarios represented a very small coverage of what is actually required, and they also have tendency to hide the most important aspects of what we are looking at. For example, some people were doing BDD scenarios to describe how periodic auctions should work in the stock exchange, and most of specifics was related on to the reference data and how instruments are configured, how markets are configured, how users and their sponsored access and clearance setup are configured. And then when people start looking into it, they are doing scenarios like trader A sent order, trader B sent order, and this is the expected result. But this expected result, it has so many assumptions that were somehow omitted from the Gherkin code. I believe my colleagues presented about on our view for BDD, both at QA Financial and other conferences, including QA Financial in Milano. And the presentation is called Behavior-Driven Development, BDD, the Outer Limits. So if anyone of esteemed colleagues is interested to learn more about our views and experience with BDD, please feel free to go to our YouTube channel. There's quite a lot of information there.
Thanks for that. Okay, I'm going to jump to a slightly different topic. So earlier this morning or this afternoon, depending upon which time zone you're in, one of our colleagues, Elena, actually spoke about testing, software testing and journalism and the differences and the similarities to them. In your experience of working with major clients around the world, and completely without saying names, what's your experience of the internal discussions around providing information about how effective or how useful a system really is going to be prior to production? Do you find that there is truth that gets presented upstairs to senior management before going to live? Or do you think it's a matter that most people really don't want to know? I.e., is it just fake news and they just pray that a problem isn't going to happen? A nice non-controversial subject.
Well, it very much depends on the people. So Elena correctly stated that it is the question of governance. You can have very good tools, you can have very good people, but you can still achieve incredible results by messing things around. In our project, we observed some people do prefer to avoid people to panic and to stop information flows. So in many cases, people prefer to fight against every single defect. So to make sure that their number is as low as possible, we also observed software development houses where the number of defects were heavily pushed towards zero, but in reality, it results not in zero defects, but in fully disrupted information flows. And when it happens, people stop receiving information. On many cases, QA managers prefer not to send the direct output of dashboard from Jira and other defect tracking systems, but try to manipulate information, etc. So it's not something simple. On one hand, you should not take any information, whether it is produced by other people or by automated tools, for granted. So skeptics skeptics is always some share of skepticism is always required. But once again, it very much depends on what's your intention. If your intention is to uh, provide information about the system, it's one thing. If the intention is to have evidence that the system is okay, regardless of its current state, you get the other result. Also, people have different views on what is software testing is. Software testing is finding defects, but frequently we encounter a different view on what is software testing. That software testing needs to give information about
But
quality,
it's interesting you say that.
etc.
Iosif, it's interesting you say that because I've met many large organizations who, on one side, they proclaim that they do the world's best job of software testing, and on the other side, their software is just horrendously terrible. And I've even worked for one of those organizations. How do you address that? I mean, it's not just the tools are effective or the people aren't effective. It's the culture or I would argue it's even more the appetite of the business to say, we want this sort of quality in our organization. But trying to get to a CEO to explain how important software quality is and what the implications are, is that something that you find that is typically done? Is it seen with that sort of level of priority even by the largest financial organizations? I.e. the CEO level, look at it and say, we need to have, the 99.999 percentile of quality in our platforms before production. Is that what you see even in the clearinghouses of the world? Or do you think there's a much more, it works, it's difficult, we'll leave it alone, or what?
I think it is very much depends on the culture, and there are two main cultures. I would say that one is learning culture, and its opposite version is the blame culture, and depending on what is promoted on the top, the organizations function differently. So if people at the top understand that they need information and that this information can actually be unpleasant, so they expect that software testing will deliver unpleasant news, then they are able to manage it appropriately and make the necessary decisions. But if it is more based on the necessity to provide information stating that our development process is okay, our developed product is fine, then it is it usually leads to a different outcome. And also, Elena explained in the presentation that managing QA or governance in a large-scale regulated organization does not mean that you go and test everything yourself. So you need to rely on tools and people. But we still see two opposing poles of, say, worst practices. The one is oversimplification. It is when you are not able to understand what's going on with the system, with automated test library, with the large number of test reports. You build some oversimplified model and then use it instead of the real, well, instead of testing reality, you're testing your simplified model, and some things can be obtained this way, but lots of other things can be missed. And when
Okay.
you deal with complex models, there is an opposing problem where you can trust blindly into a complex, say you have a huge automated regression library and you just trust in blindly. So the key to QA governance is to be skeptical on both oversimplified and over sophisticated solutions.
Okay, I mean, Yosef, that sort of leads me on
Yes,
slightly as a segue to a question from Hemi. Hemi has asked, suitable data is key to testing AI-based systems like chatbots, etc. And what is the test data strategy being used at Exactpro? Hemi, do you want to, if you want to come off mute and ask Yosef as well, I suppose. Is there anything you want to add to that, Iosif? What is the test data strategy being used, or how do we do it?
I guess that's Michael or Lawrence. Apologies, my internet signal is very low, and I could barely hear the conversation. And if everyone can hear that, that's fine. And my question is more around how the suitable test data sets have been secured. For example, financial software or medical software or something else. And it is quite difficult to get integrated, synchronized data from various sources to test these chatbots. Also, we've seen a few examples from previous conversations. And so I just wanted to get a understanding of the test data strategy in terms of securing the right data to put to test the chatbots.
well, the question of test data, I think it is relevant across the full range of system types and also institutions. And the two main distinctions are synthetic data, something that we produce, or real data is when we are able to get data from the conversation logs. For example, if we already have a system live, we can extract quite a lot of data from there. And the same thing is true to both, let's say, trading, clearing, and chatbots, etc. That this data is very sensitive, and that's why on many occasions it's very difficult to financial institutions to uh, use real data instead of synthetic data, and we constantly encounter it as a problem. But on the other hand, it is important to know that both types of data, both synthetic and real, have their own limitations. One of the main limitations of the real data is that it covers particular time periods. So say we were using projects where we were taking 6 months, etc. But the fact that something never happened over the previous 6 months is uh, is not evidence that something will not happen going forward, and that's why real data has this limitation. On the other hand, with synthetic data, we are trying to deliberately go through all possible permutations of what is available. We build model to cover all possible permutations, and then we produce a set of synthetic data that we believe guarantees us an extensive test coverage. But the problem here is that while building model, everyone is human, so we can make mistakes and miss something that obviously happens in the real life, but is for some reason is absent in our test model. So we use a variety of methods to try to reconcile what we have in synthetic data and what we have in, say, production logs. One of approaches that we use, it is called process mining. We also use some other things like, I'm sure it is visible here. There is a description of the process where we check two data sets and validate that at least particular values or say keywords are present in both data sets. So say if somebody is constantly using some bad word in real life conversations, we would like to make sure that it is also reflected in our test coverage. So our approach, to simplify it, is to look both at synthetic and at real data, acknowledge limitations on both sides, and try to use process mining and other enumeration methods to identify the gaps in synthetic data. So if we have something that is never happening in production, it is not a problem. We will just test the system for some obscure scenario. But if we have a gap in synthetic data, it is possible that we will miss a problem in production, and it is a substantially larger issue comparing to just unrealistic test scenario. Thank you.
Perfect. I think the breakout session is literally just about to finish, and I think I want to thank Lawrence for setting all this up and the guys at QA Media. If anyone has got any additional questions, please either contact myself or Thomas or Elena, and we'd be happy to try and set something up or ask immediately as well. But can I just say thank you very much for joining our breakout session today.